Hey everyone, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. This video is going to be short to the point because I'm preparing for the stream with Rick the Ukrainian. I'm going to leave the link for that in the description. But let's go over this. First and foremost, what's happening around Dnipro? Because again, we're hearing voices that Ukrainians are supposedly crossing Dnipro, liberating, establishing bridges or something like this. Guys, so far it's nonsense. I know that we really want some kind of W from Ukrainians, but we need to keep realistic and we need to keep looking at the things that are on the ground, that are proven on the ground, and not devolving and dropping into some kind of imaginary world. Right now, more videos have come up from the area, and again, the same kind of critique that I've voiced before about the region applies. I still don't see any kind of big not fortifications, but big engineering equipment being brought aboard. I don't see any kind of reinforcements or any possibilities for transferring big number of heavier vehicles. So far we can say that direction around the river is mostly just a raid or maybe reinforced raid. That reinforced raid by the Russian channels, if we can judge, are stating that Ukrainians are slowly expanding their bridgehead. I'm not sure if it can be a bridgehead if there is no bridge, but you get me. And then they're also very loudly claiming that Ukrainians were able to capture some of the islands on Dnipro River. Again, this is what was happening before. This is what's happening now. It's a very limited operation so far. I will tell you right away if there are any other developments. With regards to Robotina area, the most important thing is not what Ukrainians doing. As I said, for Ukrainians to continue offensive in this direction, to get additional movement forward, Ukrainians need to send additional reinforcements in the area. This is not happening right now. Ukraine is not dedicating additional resources. The only thing that is happening there is maybe rotation or troops that coming in to reinforce troops that have lost certain efforts. The same thing that's happening around Bakhmut, where existing Ukrainian forces are going to continue their slow tactical offensive, trying to break Russians out of their positions by applying good tactics and potentially some local dominance. But for now, I don't expect any major breakthroughs, and we should not as well. Russians have fortified this area as well. What Russians have done additionally is they've moved. I've talked about last video that Russians have been moving a lot of efforts to Avdiivka. They have moved area from the north. They have moved additional reinforcements from Russia, whatever they had. Right now, troops are also being pulled out from Robotina area. And most of the people are guessing that they are going to Avdiivka because there is a political desire to do so. But from what I've heard so far, it's just that the troops are being withdrawn from Robotina area. But so far, we have not heard whether or not the troops that have been withdrawn from Robotina area are now appearing in Avdiivka. Potentially, they can also be sent to Kherson area to reinforce that. But again, I still am not sold on the whole Kherson front line. So for now, I'm going to say that the troops are being moved to the Avdiivka area. What we can talk about around Avdiivka area is what's the actual composition of troops. And I took my sweet time and I actually dig into all of the possible sources. I found some really trusted sources that provided me with the numbers of what kind of brigades are working in Avdiivka, what kind of number of brigades, what is the approximate composition of these brigades. The issue is that the numbers that I found are only listing the brigades and units and the composition of those units that are in full force. But we know that Russians are not using full force brigades and full force units. A lot of the units that Russian units are using are either understaffed or secondly, they were already in combat and sustained certain casualty levels. Moreover, we know that in Russian military, they completely dropped the common sense agreement when a unit sustains like 30-40% damages to it and casualties, then that unit is combat ineffective. It's been completely waived in Russia, and the unit can be technically considered combat effective until they are completely gone and they are off the record, and then they need to be reconstituted. So the numbers that I'm going to tell you, I'm going to take just the 50% mark of whatever units and people that could be. So it can be more, technically, if it's more than 50% composition, or it can be less. But I feel, generally speaking, how we've seen Russia fight and what the general compositions are, this is approximately what we need to expect. So looking first and foremost at the number of men that are operating in this area. The number of men is about 80,000. These 80,000 is obviously included in the fighting forces, rifle brigades, part of the tankers, and so on and so on and so on. So people that are actively joining the combat. This is quite a lot for the current state of the war to be concentrated on a certain area. And this 80,000 is also including casualties that Russians have sustained with their initial pushes. With regards to the fighting vehicles for AFV, so any kind of armored fighting vehicle, be it the APC or a BMP or MTLB, it's technically like a utility vehicle, but Russians have been using it for fighting anyway. So all of it is fighting vehicles. And the numbers that I have been kind of looking for and so on is somewhere in a ballpark of 2,000 vehicles. So vehicles, about 2,000. Then with regards to tanks, and for tanks, it's again unclear, but it's anywhere around 600 tanks. That's the numbers that we are operating in this area. So what this tells me is that while we see Russians losing hundreds and hundreds of vehicles, and those losses are significant, generally speaking, we still can look at this and say, okay, Russia has sustained significant damages. It's going to be really problematic for them to go forward, but they still have some ability to go forward. Remember that it's not the same one for one. So it's like if Russia has 600 tanks in this area, that doesn't mean, again, it's a question of number. I'm still leaning that it's going to be maybe a little bit less, but this is based on the numbers that I was given. The same number of tanks is not. Remember that the attacking force, especially by the Russian military, need to be many times more prevalent than the Ukrainian. For open field attacking ratio, the common knowledge is that it should be about 3 to 1. So 3 to 1. But that's the open field, and that was for the previous warfare. Now we're in a lot different warfare, in a lot different qualities. Right now, the estimates are for an effective push that will help you advance the movement forward, an attacker actually needs something closer to 9 to 1. So for every 9 troops that Russia sends to attack Ukrainian positions, Ukraine need 1 defender to continue defending those positions, roughly estimating. And the same kind of goes for tanks. So taking that 9 to 1 ratio for the Russian effective advance, you can easily just calculate yourself that at some point with this tempo of losses, Russia will fall beyond this ratio, and at that moment we can see a slowdown. So what are we observing right now on Avdiivka? Right now, Russia was having a very effective attack at the north, where they were able to capture certain positions, certain tactical positions. But right now, most of their forces are actually concentrating in this area south. So the expectations are that either it is because Ukrainians are preparing for their counter-push, which they already did in this area here, or this is done to make sure that the next push is coming from the southern direction. Right now, Russians are not using a lot of armors, a lot of vehicles. Right now, Russians are mostly sending in their troops. And in the north, they have reached the outskirts of the chemical plant that is located here. So it's about here. Russians themselves claim that they're about 700 meters to 1 kilometers to that plant. That plant is crucial for Russians to take if they want to continue towards encirclement of Avdiivka. Without it, this whole thing is kind of, for now, useless. So all in all, to sum up, for now, Avdiivka is fine, but Russia still have forces. However, Ukrainians are defending quite well. They are retreating Russian forces significantly, and all of the pointers estimate that Russia has about 1 to 2 weeks left before the actual bad weather kicks in, and which pretty much any kind of mass armored vehicle pushes are going to be directed to Anan. And interestingly, some of the pro-Russian propagandists are saying that, hey, this is quickly becoming the next Bakhmut, which is absolutely surprising to me, because Bakhmut was one of the biggest disasters for the Russians in the conflict. They've lost so much manpower in taking of Bakhmut, a city that didn't really wasn't that important. And at that moment, Ukraine didn't have the combat capabilities it has now. So Russians are saying, like pro-Russian shills are saying, that this is the next Bakhmut, like this is a good thing. I'll remind you that the taking of Bakhmut has costed Russia complete disintegration of the Wagner unit, which doesn't exist anymore, which was one of the better forces that Russia had in their stockpile. And more importantly, it ended up with a coup attempt at Putin, which didn't succeed only because Prigozhin had no balls. With regards to other directions, it's mostly right now tactical approaches. Bakhmut is also the same way. Ukrainians are holding the line. As far as I've heard, Ukrainians still have reserves. I got motivated, so to say, by some of the contacts on the Ukrainian side saying, hey, we actually had some extra new brigades that are fresh and prepared, so it's not all doom and gloom. And we actually are also planning for our actions further down the road. So it's all not really bad. I know that everyone wants a W, but we're going to get there at some point. Thank you so much for watching this. Thank you so much to the moderating team. If you want to support this channel on Buy Me a Coffee, that's really appreciated. But you should first and foremost go to the first comment under the video and support Ukrainian Armed Forces directly. Slava Ukraini, guys. I love you all, and I'll see you next time.